Hello, Rantbox TV watchers. Once again, I'm Simon and I'll be your host again for this week. As usual, on Rantbox Fridays, the panel and I will be bringing you commentary on a range of different topics of focus on social issues and also some topical points as well. We're going to be continuing our discussion that we started last week on cancel culture because we thought that we just didn't have enough time last time. So I've put together some more questions and I believe we can kick off with the first one in regards to a particular issue that came up a few years ago. So this is going to be taken by John, I believe, which is, do take-backs, deleted tweets and apologies seem hollow to you?
Thanks, Simon. This is a strange topic because the question implies that I need to have a particular viewpoint on these people that I've not met, but might hold stations of office, maybe in schools, factories, industry, whatever. So I think maybe the deeper question is, do the public at large believe these take-backs? There was an incident with a director called James Gunn, who you may or may not know was a prominent director for Marvel, doing Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a franchise. And some years ago, he tweeted some, I don't know how really you could put it across, but I'd say homophobic jokes from the early 2000s kind of school of comedy. And that didn't necessarily go down well when he was subsequently axed from being at Marvel and then, or Disney rather, and then was brought back. So in answer to your question, I don't really necessarily feel that you can generalize about this kind of thing. There are different situations which, you know, I'm more likely to believe in James Gunn saying that he's transformed his opinion on how he deals with things in the public discourse than, say, Piers Morgan. But yeah, there's more to talk about in regards to your question, but I wanted to know how everyone else felt about it before we move into what I'm calling for now story time with John, because it's quite an in-depth piece of information that I'm going to give up. But yeah, how does everyone else think about that question?
I agree with what you've said. I think it depends on who it's come from. That's when it, like, you can think about whether you believe it or not. So like you said about James Gunn, you're more inclined to believe it than you are someone like Piers Morgan or someone who you think's just saying it to get back into popularity and they've not really learned the lesson or educated themselves about it.
I think we were all talking about ContraPoint's video. I think we were discussing that between the last episode and this one, and I think we've all kind of gone away and watched that. I think an interesting point made during that video is that sometimes I think, especially because of so much of cancel culture that we've been talking about is Twitter related. With Twitter, sometimes a take back is worse than saying nothing at all in some circles, and it can be, even the most genuine of people, I think, can really struggle to give a convincing apology. And I think some people just aren't allowed to apologize. That's, you know, for better or worse. And as Alice says, you know, from someone like Piers Morgan or Katie Hopkins, you're just like, do you really care? And then there are other folks like James Gunn where you kind of want to be on their side, but it's hard to say, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
What criteria we're using to decide who, you know, who's genuine and who's not, and that's such a difficult one. And you know, I don't know how much it really is for us to all have to make such a decision, you know, like really, like who's sincere and who's not. That seems crazy even to ask as a question.
Yeah, sure. It was one of my ones, so it could be.
Sorry.
But
Simon, you're crazy. The news is in.
I am. Deadpool's my spirit animal. So we do have guys like the likes of Kevin Hart, who I know. Obviously, I've followed him as a comedian for many, many years. And if you don't know, he was due to be the Oscars host in 2019, but some tweets resurfaced from 2010, 2011, which had a homophobic slant towards them. Now, he was speaking to Joe Rogan on his podcast last year. And obviously he's had media training, but I also think he's thought about this a lot because he disappeared for 4 to 5 months and he's thought about it and how he was going to return. And he sounded genuinely upset with himself, first and foremost, that he upset people, because his feeling, what he wants to bring to the world is an idea of joy and happiness. He doesn't want anyone to feel upset. And what he said back in 2010 to 2011 isn't necessarily what he is now. But as most of you have also mentioned, it also depends on the person. Piers Morgan, another example. I don't really believe he would ever say he's sorry or take it back unless there's a 6-figure deal on the table or even more. Does anyone, John, sorry, and you wanted to add to this as well?
Yeah, I think that what we did last time in terms of, cynically speaking, the format was great. And so I'm going to do the old kind of, what I'm going to talk about is something that I'll kind of end like the discussion with. So
sure.
We'll come back to this first point later on.
Not a problem. So, okay, so this is actually a really good segue then, going back to sort of the Piers Morgans and so forth with when should a public figure stand by their statement? And this is Alice.
So this is a difficult one. It's built on what we're saying, like, you know, it's to do with the person and the individual context. So if it all comes down to what we see as like morally kind of right for me. So if someone's saying something that's harmful or discriminatory, then that's not okay. Like, you know, they shouldn't stand by that. And we, like we've said already about people who've released tweets years and years and years ago, we live, we learn, we educate ourselves, we get better, we become better people, social attitudes change. But the issue comes from like when you're getting people who are cancelled, and it's not a form of calling each other out, it's a form of like social shutdown. And for sometimes it's not really on the right stuff. It can be when someone's trying to question something, or they're trying to ask questions about a topic they don't know, and they get cancelled straight away without A, getting an answer to the question, and B, like just before anyone's took into consideration their point of view. And when I was researching this earlier, like, you know, there was a lot of stuff talking about, you know, we shouldn't cancel people because we don't know why they disagree with us. So when we're saying when should the public figure stand by their statement, we need to take in context, that's number one, but also we need to kind of normalize the questioning society, because that's how social change comes about. And if we're just cancelling people who are speaking up about important issues, then we're just discouraging people to share their opinions, and we're discouraging like social change in that way, if that makes any sense.
Shouldn't there be also the question of where they're choosing to have their discussion? I mean, if you walk into like the hell pit that is Twitter and you ask certain questions, why be surprised that the internet will give you certain answers in the vitriolic way that it does?
Yeah, definitely. We need to kind of know our platform, know our audience. But again, if we make it this kind of culture where we are saying, no, you can't ask that because everyone's scared of being cancelled for saying the wrong thing or asking the wrong question, then we're shutting down all them other social spaces in which we can do it safely.
That's fair. And maybe we should talk about a specific example, because for me, I can't really get it out of my mind. But if you know what Twitter is and you use it as a way of actually delivering, it's normally Twitter, as Ollie was saying earlier, and a lot of our examples have been, that people will choose to have a really nuanced conversation in a place where there is no nuance. And if you're doing it there and then shit goes wrong and you call foul, I'm not sure how to really deal with that. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say in specific examples, if you mean just how we generally use it, for example, with me, when I'm on Twitter, there's been many times where I've misunderstood somebody or someone's misunderstood me. And I've had this really great opportunity for dialogue. It's actually, I don't like the fact that, but it surprised me how patient some people are with trying to find that that place where we can reach either an agree to disagree type situation, or that time and space to really hash it out. Even if you just look at my timeline, it's all there, and I left it there on purpose, even though there's some parts that make me squirm where I really didn't get my point across well. There's been so many times where people have been patient enough to wait till I actually got it, and vice versa. So that's obviously gives me faith in Twitter. So what did you call it? Help it?
Yeah, I cleaned up my act. Last episode, it was something else. It has to be said that there is something to be said for people who have a need to talk about these things on social media and work out their issues there. And I find it highly dubious, especially if they've got a prominent platform. What they're saying can be reappropriated by mainstream media that is less investigative, that is less interested in and will happily give them an open ed to talk about race or gender or sexuality in a way that supports non-investigative attitudes, which should be changed, which should be definitely investigated at a secondary school level, whether it be items that the Black curriculum, the charity is suggesting should be in the syllabus, or gender and sexuality being something that we talk about in a far broader fashion, or rather specific fashion for a larger community, which has now got visibility.
Maybe I need to step in for Matt, who's absent today, and just reiterate a point that I know that he would make were he here, which is that obviously, in continuation of what John is saying, Twitter and its algorithm and the way it's based is based on a system of returns. So the more attention something gets, the more it is presented to other people. And that does encourage a system where, I think decontextualization is important, because you want to get people angry, because that feeds the beast. And yeah, there are days, I think, when I am with John, and I think the best thing Jack Dorsey could do is burn Twitter to the ground. And then there are other days when I'm with Reshma, and I'm like, okay, like, I think that people are essentially quite good natured. And I think given the right space and the right rules, they can actually have a good discourse. I think I mentioned last time places and spaces like Quora, where the moderation is okay, still a little bit random, but there are strict rules about, be nice, be respectful, the BNBR rule and things like that, where that becomes the long form answer becomes more important than the quick one. Yet obviously still there's a gear towards the most attention, the most reactions, the most comments. So maybe the machinery and the rules changing might help there. And I enjoy listening to Jack Dorsey being pulled apart by people like Kara Swisher on things like that, because you get an insight into the fact that these people know that there's a problem, and then they are actively working on a solution. It's just such a titanic problem to face.
That's a good point, or points. I mean, maybe we have to set the terms. There are certain people who will talk on social media and they'll have a certain amount of traffic, which again will be part of the fuel or commodity of mainstream media who want to keep a certain agenda or keep an eye. We can talk on Twitter with a certain kind of safe space. I mean, this here is a safe space, and we know, all right. So even if you have that kind of attitude here, I'm not sure if people like, well, Katie Hopkins is off Twitter now, but there are others like her, right? And I don't think they're necessarily going to become good people soon. So,
Oh. Good.
What does Simon think? Simon, what do you think of your own question?
So for myself, I've got to come from my point of view and where I receive a lot of my information from, and it is very much opinion based. So I look at a lot of YouTube for sort of getting my ideas and things like that. So in recent times, Ollie's favorite person's come up a couple of times, Jordan Peterson. Throw salt over the shoulder, and a few Ben Shapiro's and Candice Owens have also come up as well. And they are all incredibly controversial personalities, depending on where you stand. And for myself, I find at a point I thought I was quite a liberal person in some respects, and where I stood on certain things. But having spent more and more time looking at the likes of YouTube and so forth, I think I'm more becoming conservative with a small c. Of that, I believe that if the person has done the relevant research and they're providing facts in regards to workplace, sort of like pay disputes and other workplace issues or social issues, and the facts are presented correctly and backed up, I have to agree with them. I have to, if in my respect. So I don't know if anyone else feels similar or disagrees.
Why would you agreeing with facts be something that could be disputed?
Well, I think there's an interesting point here to the both of you, which is something that I constantly come back to in debates, particularly one sort of what would you say, modern partisan debate, if you will, which is the work of Isaiah Berlin, a philosopher of sorts. He had a concept called pluralism, and his particular take on pluralism is that even with the same starting point, the same society, the same facts, the same approach, any variable you could name, you can still, by the smallest margin, end up with a very different outcome from the same input. You could hear a set of facts, and one person can take away two people can take away two very different things from that in the end. And I think that's an interesting point, both politically, philosophically, socially, that actually, whereas one person can hear, okay, this is an issue and this is how we resolve it, another person can hear the same thing and come away differently. And I think it's interesting to say that there are no alternative facts. I think if Trump has taught us anything, there are no alternative facts, but there are alternative interpretations and alternative solutions. And I think sometimes people get the facts mixed up with the solutions. The Ben Shapiro's of the world who like to shout, facts don't care about your feelings. But your interpretation of the facts really bugs the hell out of me. You know what I mean? Like, you can read what you wish to a degree.
People like Ben Shapiro, especially Candace Owens, they like to present facts in a way that they believe they understand, and the people who, for want of a better way of saying it, that are more left, are not necessarily adhering to or want to ignore because they are in some way weak or snowflakes. And that, I think, is an issue in itself. You can't present these things as though you own them. You can't own the facts. They're there to be interpreted.
I think if in the case of Candace Owens and her association with PragerU, that's largely presenting graphs and charts without indices and without any context whatsoever. That's just basically bullshit merchantry.
Yeah. She wants to sell her book. That's all she wants to do. Good luck to
I know.
her. It's a bad book. Anyway.
Yep. Absolutely. She's been found out, and the Black community are not happy with her at all. And I can agree with them at some points as well. So we'll move on to our next question, if no one else has anything else to say on our previous one. No? Okay. So our next question is regarding virtue signaling and also virtue ethics. What do we think about them in online and in person? And I believe that Ollie is going to take this one.
Sorry, it's just a lot on my face at the start of this one. Don't worry.
It's fine. It's a great face.
I try for the best. I've got the, please beautify me switch on Zoom here. So I think the most important thing to recognize here is the fact that, much like we were talking about and raised with cancel culture last time, it's such a huge issue because it's not a modern thing. The context is modern, but the actual process is a very old one. Virtual signaling is actually kind of important. I think an interesting point raised during some of my researches, and I'm really disappointed because I've lost a piece of paper where I wrote this down. There was a gentleman of a conservative bent who was actually mentioning, he's an evolutionary biologist, and his point was that without virtue signaling, society as we know it would not exist, which was an interesting point to get from a conservative small c. because, you know, without some performative action to show people that you have an intent, you have an ethic, you have a creed by which you live, you can't kind of include them in your story. You can't make a whole society as a whole. So all of human achievement basically rests upon some form of virtue signaling, be that to get a mate in the most basic terms, or to form a society or a group. However, another point interestingly raised, which I found quite interesting, was the fact that, yeah, like cancel culture, virtue signaling is being used as a stick to beat the left with, as these things often are. And frankly, I think the left maybe has it coming. I'm relatively center left myself, but I think there's an interesting point raised where when you go, ethics is something that you've lived. Ethics is something you've experienced and something that you have created and chipped away over time, like a ongoing work of art that you perform through your whole life. But I think there's an interesting phenomenon with a lot of left-wing and progressive, left-wing is the wrong term because it's more of an economic thing, but progressive policy, where people are caring a lot about stuff of which they have no personal experience, no personal dog in the race, nothing but the fact that maybe it's, you know, it's the cause du jour, you know. And at that point, when you start to overreach your experience, it starts to look shallow, it starts to look kind of hollow and difficult to maintain. The interesting example given was actually student protests about apartheid in South Africa. And in the space of a year, it went from no one had ever even heard of it to everybody really, really cared. And it's not that the end was bad. The end result was a good thing. But just the fact that you find yourself wondering, okay, how much of this is performative and how much of this is real? You know, and that depends on where you come from and how you are. And, you know, in some cases, personally, for me, it makes me very hesitant to comment or to virtue signal or to express ethics in certain areas in which I don't feel like I have a dog in the race, unless someone specifically asks me, of course.
Very comprehensive. I would add to that in that there is obviously a very good place that people have in their mind as to what this world can be like. And if they don't see that being reflected in their day-to-day, then they will obviously find ways to talk about it, especially online. And when they do find a cause that maybe they've just bumped into, whether it be the one that you just cited, Ollie, then you can't necessarily blame them for wanting to actually be part of it and doing the right thing. But yeah, obviously there's going to be people who are doing it for social acumen. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can really add to it any further than that. Ollie, you've actually done really well for yourself there.
I try my best.
You need to have some kind of point system or prizes, you know, that'd be good.
I'm not giving them out this week. Sorry, no points, no points.
We'll get a Stanley no prize. That would be good.
Alice or Reshma, do you have anything to add to that?
I'd just say that I really like that you described it as shallow. Like, say, it can be shallow. I think that's a fantastic way to kind of describe what virtue signaling can come across as sometimes. So on the one hand, it can be people jumping on a cause because it resonates with them for some reason, even though it's relatively new. But then on the other hand, it can be shallow as well. I thought that was a really good description.
Yes. Yeah, I did like that as well. I was thinking, because there's a term that has been sort of cropping up quite a lot, and that's the pseudo-moralism. And I think that when it was similarly, it was you, Oliver, last week that was talking about moral panic. I thought about that a lot later, that how we are deciding to practice, in a sense, lessons in humility. You know, and so, you know, you have to sort of be you have to be in a humble place, I think, to want to learn from something. And I don't know that we're actually practicing that before we've even come to a point of trying to form an opinion on something that we've never heard of before. It's about how we're taking in that information in the first place. And I think, like with most stories, you know, even if you read a piece of fiction, you are asked to look at the characters and their stories and make a judgment call on where you lie, and how you align, you know, how you align yourself. Do you relate to the characters? So we're being asked, in a sense, to create a picture and a moral argument constantly in life. And I don't think that has to be looked at as phony or fake in any way, it helps us learn and become who we are eventually going to be. So I think maybe it's about the objective in these narratives. We need to decide what our objectives are when we come into an argument. What do you think?
I think there's one point that, yeah, I actually really agree with that. And the one thing I would kind of back up the statement with, because I do feel kind of very unusually negative with this whole approach, but one thing I would say is that, especially as you were saying with moral panic, I think the one thing that constantly crosses my mind, especially in the last year or so, has just been the fact that it was once said to me that a gift given with the expectation of return is not a gift at all. And I feel like sometimes with virtue signaling or something like that, the best kind of virtue signaling is the kind where, you put boots on the ground or bums on seats or hands in the air and you keep quiet and you don't ask for anything back, you just do. And I think that just doing is the most important thing. And, like you have to ask yourself every time you find yourself in that position, in doing this, is this a gift that I'm giving to make the world a better place? Or is this perhaps something that I'm doing with the expectation of return? I mean, sometimes that's okay. That's fine. You have to look after yourself. But I think in the case of a friend of mine, for instance, tonight is attending a rally down in Parliament Square for reasons which I'm sure will become very plain. And, in that case, I don't think they intend to be on the front page of a newspaper. I think they intend to make their feelings known. And I think that's a good thing. But then, when you get the Piers Morgans of the world virtue signaling by spitting a sausage roll out on TV or walking out of a TV show into a more lucrative career, that's where you sort of start to think, okay, that is not a gift. That is a backhanded self-gift, if you see what I mean.
Sure. So maybe we should investigate why people tend to do this kind of thing. I mean, we've had various different parts of history really shift the public's faith in those who have power, whether we're talking about Watergate or Reagan and Contra affair, or we're talking about over in this side of the world in the UK when it comes to Thatcher's dealing with privatization and the miners' strikes. It just goes on. Blair's treatment of weapons of mass destruction. At some point, you feel that now you've got this salvo before you, whether it be called Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. You can use that in order to transform the world that you have around you just by pressing buttons. And even if people will be performative about that, it speaks to a higher social goal that sometimes we think is just beyond us, no matter who we vote for, or in 2015 when Russell Brand tells you not to vote for anyone. So,
Yeah, I definitely do understand the performative nature of certain actions. When the Black Lives Matter movement kicked off after George Floyd's death last year, there was a push on social media to black out your profile. And I took just a moment, maybe, that afternoon to think, do I want to join this action, this movement? Obviously, knowing who I am and my family and so forth, I feel that I should be supporting the message as well. But having done my research into the group as a whole, I don't agree with everything that they have said or done. The movement has been, in my opinion, hijacked by certain people who have goals that aren't necessarily about equality for myself. They're looking for, once again, for me, vengeance. For maybe things that happened many years ago, for things that happened for George Floyd, for the fact that they may have not got that job because they thought that they lost it out to someone who was Caucasian as well. And I often speak to people in my community as well, and that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth sometimes is, well, if I was white, I would have got that loan or so and that. And I understand there is institutional racism in certain parts. I do understand that, but on the other side, for me as well, I've been told, work hard, try not to get yourself in too much trouble, and things will come to you as well, because that is how society is built. We are part of this. We are the society. We are part of this society as well. And I mean, it's as I say, these are all sort of my personal feelings within it, and this is what I share, and I'm glad, as John said, this is a space where I can share it with you guys as well.
I'm keen to talk about this later on. I disagree with so much you've said, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be wonderful.
Cool.
Fireworks, fun.
Cool.
But yeah, do keep on doing your host thing. Oh wait, Reshma has a question.
Why later?
Yeah, bring it now.
Because the thing is, if this video is called what it is to do with cancel culture, I don't know if you can stay on this particular part of the topic for as long. I've already given it some time. It's not even me. I'm not even supposed to be hosting today. I've got to stop this shit. What the fuck?
No, that's fine, because
Simon, take over. Get back in that chair.
The only thing I was going to add to that, of course you can come back, is just something I picked up, which was about Jean Piaget, the Swiss psychologist, and his research partner, Barbel Intelder. They wrote together for years, but in 1958, they came up with a concept of formal operational development stages as well. And one of those stages can be called the messianic stage. And this is taken from an abstract from Jen J. Rockman from the University of Hamburg, Faculty of Education. And it was his work on educational psychology in June 2020. What he mentions in the abstract is, here's the stage model is used to explain why in late adolescence and early adulthood, many young people are prone to adopt idealistic and utopian social and political ideas, which they reassert with an almost zealous vigor. I see that everywhere over social media and so forth. So maybe you'd like to discuss that, or John, we can go back to what I said, or if you have anything else.
Well, to be honest, a slight callback is that what you were saying before kind of sounds as though you believe BLM is one unit when it's many different people using that idea. But as I said, it's a can of worms. I wanted you to stay there. Those worms are living all over the table, man. We can't do that shit right now.
Not right now. Yeah, pitchforks at dawn sometimes, but no. Does anyone else have anything on that part? No, Ollie?
I think there was one thing. There's an interesting point there that you raised with how should we put the boisterousness of youth and idealism, and it's an old trope. I think obviously there's some scientific or evolutionary reasons for that. Teenagers are meant to rebel as hard as possible in order to escape their parents, to somehow improve the group, that sort of thing. And then a part of that does kind of fall into sort of some extreme ethical shifts. Part of it maybe is to do with the fact that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. You read about how there's this great idea where maybe everyone doesn't have to work as much, and we can all be happy, and as long as we're all decent human beings, it'll work out fine. But then you don't know about the other side of history. That's a common problem when I speak to people who still are good old-fashioned communists, like not the fun UBI kind, the really hardcore, like here's the manifesto type. And I can understand where they're coming from, because there have been points where I've been like, look, that is the perfectly ideal situation. But I think maybe the difference is not that people get less inclined towards utopian ideas as they get older. They just temper them with experience. I mean, that's something for me. Like my most deeply held ethical beliefs are still basically the same ones I've had since I was a kid. They're the ones I was raised with, and I've questioned them many times. But over the years, I've realized that maybe the obstacles to that goal are different to what I imagined they were to begin with. The obstacle to my making a better Britain is mostly, for want of a better term, Daily Mail readers in Middle England. Whereas at one point I thought maybe it was the goal.
Say that again.
I was going to say, I think, when I was a teenager, I figured the biggest problem in the world was, money or the system or like the man. And as I get older, I realized maybe it's not the man. I think it's people as a whole. Like maybe people aren't quite what you imagine them to be. So, like I say, like people like your average Daily Mail reader, your average Middle Englander, the kind of people that have, sorry to say it, repeatedly voted us into some considerable national trouble in the last few years. You start to realize it's not to put things at people's door, because I think people vote or choose to do things for the right reasons. It's just that, where I want to end up the people standing in the way aren't who I thought they were. And when you're a teenager, you don't know your ass from your elbow, and it's dangerous. So I'm starting to rotate on the same point here. So someone else better jump in.
You're right, man. Like, definitely I can relate to a lot of that, but maybe with a bit of a slight change. Because when I was a teenager, I wanted to believe, the man is the problem. But as I've got older, even though it's very easy to think, actually, it's not necessarily the man, it's the people. I think they're symbiotic. Yeah, the system corrupts the people. The people throw their corruptions back at the system through various different channels. We've talked about social media a lot, but there's other different channels, and that creates the mess that we're in. And they seem quite linked, how to distinguish one from the other, and those who purport to be against the system when they're actually for it. It's quite manifold.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's easy to fall into sort of false dichotomy or trichotomy, or however many cotomies you wish in that debate. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of subtlety to the point, but you see where I'm coming from. Like the focus is shifted. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So great responses to that. So I want to move on to our fourth question, which is, are you or we ever skeptical when well-known brands or public companies change their messaging to the latest hot topic issue? I'm going to kick us off for this one. So to give some examples of what I've seen from my experience of working within marketing teams and the likes, when the COVID-19 pandemic started, all our entire team was told, do not speak to the press, do not speak to anybody at all. Okay, we do not know what's going to go on with our events or anything of that nature at all. Do not speak to anyone at all. Okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And then once I started to look at, the sort of messaging that was coming out in regards to speaking about COVID, initially, people were very, very reluctant to even mention the C word at all. You would have it in no emails or anything at all, because probably for the right reason. We weren't exactly sure what it was, how long it was going to be going on for, and that. But then as soon as we realized, so I believe that companies realized that we were going to be in this for the long haul, I got 10s, 20s, 30s of emails from companies I hadn't even thought about in 2 years, but signed up to their newsletter saying, Simon, I hope you're well. I hope you and your family are well. We care about you. We care about our employees and everyone else. And that's lovely, Interflora, but I'm not buying from you at the moment. I don't want to buy from you. You don't care. I personally believe it's about their bottom line. It's about their bottom line. They want to keep the customers. They want to keep themselves afloat. And sure, that is what a company is there to do. I want to talk about the Premier League now. Players and officials have been kneeling before kickoff since the start of last season, middle of last season, following the death of George Floyd in May last year. Wilfried Zaha, a player for my team, Crystal Palace, is the first player in the Premier League to not take the knee. And he is a black player at that as well. So I've taken the following from an article on ESPN, where he stated, there is no right or wrong decision, but for me, personally, I feel kneeling has become a part of the pre-match routine. And at the moment, it doesn't matter whether we kneel or stand. Some of us continue to receive abuse. On the podcast, he said, why must I even wear the Black Lives Matter on the back of my top to show that we matter? This is all degrading. Finally, when people constantly want me to do Black Lives Matter talks and racial talks and I'm like, I'm not doing it so you can just put Zaha spoke for us, tick a box. He just doesn't want to do it anymore. And yeah, I generally have quite a strong feeling about quotas, box ticking, always saying the right thing. I have an issue with it myself, as I've stated previously. I do have some others, but I want to open that up. Obviously, it doesn't have to be about BLM. It can be about anything generally regarding the original question.
I think what he's done, from what you said, is actually quite an interesting, powerful thing, because he's kind of owning that moment and saying, hey, what are you doing about footballers and their abuse? I mean, I've got no interest in football. Like when you said Premier League, I was thinking, oh God, no, please don't talk about football. But what we're talking about here is a political issue. Should he take the knee or not, I suppose would be like the really kind of basic kind of question that people probably want to go to. But I think what he's done with that space is saying, hey, like ultimately, I don't want to perform the idea of doing this. And I think that's quite worthy. I mean, just from what you said, but maybe there's a counterpoint from anyone.
From anyone, Alice, John, Ollie.
I think there's an interesting parallel here, and forgive my kind of crude parallel, but I think there's an interesting thing here with poppies. And it's a strange thing, but every year people wear a poppy and they wear it for the right reason. And actually, I think that's a good thing. And personally, I'm completely behind it. I think that's, it's good. It is sometimes performative, sometimes it's not. But I think the idea behind is that everyone does it. And I think the majority of people do wear one color or another, and with one meaning or another, knowing that at that moment on that day, they say, okay, look, this is a thing that I want to do because I want to show my appreciation. And, I think obviously taking a knee is a more recent thing. I think doing it in every match is an interesting point. When will that end? Will there ever be an end to that? Is that going to become a tradition that we do at every match from now on? There's no set day for that. So it is slightly different, but yeah, it's an interesting point. I don't think anyone in the teams, maybe there are a few people who feel pressured to do that, sure. But I think given the abuse that I've seen from some players, I think it's most of them probably doing it out of a sense of altruism, given the possible blowback. And now Simon's got his hand up.
So I was just going to say, I think there was James McLean, who's a Southern Irish player. He said he did not want to wear poppies on his shirt. He plays for the Ireland football team. This came out last year.
I think there's an element with the Irish side of things where obviously that has a whole load of baggage that comes with it. So I absolutely forgive that. And to be honest, I think that anyone who chooses not to wear one, as long as they have a valid reason, that's fair. But I mean, there are other options. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing that like you say, like when it's a group of individuals who can make their own individual choices about what and what not to do, then it becomes a different thing, even though they are corporately sponsored. Mm-hmm. It's hard to separate the individual from the group there, I think.
In the end, the Premier League is a brand like anything else. The Oscars the Oscars are so white controversy. John, you may be able to help me with this. Was this 2017 or 2018? Or anyone else knows?
I want to say 17.
I thought it was 2016.
Really?
Okay.
We'll find out when the comments tell us off.
Please do. But if you don't know about that, it was tweeted that the Oscars are so white, and then you saw in following years that there was quite a large push to have more minority members on the selecting boards. I believe, or the selection panels and the likes. And then the year after, Moonlight, pretty good film actually, won the Oscar. This year, we are seeing, I think, your first Asian nominee for lead categories as well, which I think is great, and it maybe wouldn't have stemmed from this initial pressure, let's say, that came from Twitter and so forth. So, anyone else on that point before I move on?
Yeah, okay. So when you say that initial pressure, would you say is it pressure to react, pressure to do something, or pressure to dialogue, in your opinion? Like, where, in a sense, where does the objective lie? Do you know? I don't know much about that, sorry.
So myself personally, I believe that this was the fact that Moonlight won and other films like that, or other people were nominated, was a knee-jerk reaction from Hollywood, from the Oscars, to appease people for the time being. And we've seen, the likes of Black Panther making billions and billions of dollars, which means that you can make more money and sell more merchandising and so forth. So this pressure initially, sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry, I'm just going back to it. Yeah.
Okay. So it's about whether it's the pressure to do something about it, do something real, to create real change. Or what are the objectives, in a sense, for that pressure? And I mean, does it even have one voice, which I doubt?
In my opinion, I don't necessarily think it has a goal for them, apart from, once again, to keep their bottom lines up, to make sure that they keep the money rolling in. There's another abstract from Exercising Concepts of Virtue Ethics in Business Culture by Mitashi Tripathi and Dr. Ichiri Sarangi. Business culture is an intriguing platform. Each company seeks better positions, name, popularity, security, and success, overpowered with technology and intensifying outsourcing today. The world seems very mechanical. Achieving goals and targets are no more velvety in business culture. So I don't know if anyone disagrees or agrees with that point. I don't know if it answered your question.
But can you read that again?
Of course. Business culture is an intriguing platform. Each company seeks better position, name, popularity, security, and success. Overpowered with technology and intensifying outsourcing, today the world seems very mechanical. Achieving goals and targets are no more velvety in business culture.
What does velvety mean in this context? Sorry.
Velvet. I would say, when I think of velvety, it's sort of like that utopia concept of, it's all very nice and, everything is smooth over and everyone is happy and equal, and, we skip and sing around the maypole and things of that nature. I personally, when I think of velvety, does anyone else have a different definition of that?
I can definitely speak to what you were saying regarding changing the square on your Facebook, because I decided not to do it as well, because it felt like this idea of standing by the whole Black Lives Matter thing was a way of business folding in an idea into itself, like it had done with music beforehand. Like the whole music industry was deciding to go along with this as well, because I remember reading this in the NME on that day. I decided not to do it. People are sick to death of the virtue signaling culture, taking really, really important themes and making it almost like playthings or tools for people to prop themselves up with. So even if, what's the name of that player that refused to take the knee that you told us about, Simon?
Wilfred Zaha.
So even if Wilfred is kind of going against a protest by suggesting that that protest has already got so much power, that in itself reinvitalizes us thinking about it rather than performative actions, which can become quite robotic. Taking this back to your statement about business just wants things to keep moving so they can make money. But when people get in the way, or when deaths happen, then business has to find a way of reappropriating that, and reappropriating that even. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Or 2 pennies, I'm English.
We tend to know when we're being manipulated or when we're being gently guided towards something. So things like when ideas are being marketed to us, or when we're, subject to propaganda. I think even if we haven't been taught to recognize it, there's something there. You can kind of feel it. And I think sometimes we allow it. We're okay with it. It's just it's almost a contractual agreement, that if you're willing, then and especially with products. So I think this was based on the idea that brands are jumping on ideas. So from that perspective, if a brand sort of takes up something and decides to fly that flag for a while, I think we know they're doing it, and if let's say we support that brand, all we need for them is to, in a sense, make that that message, that hot topic, part of their message, and it makes us feel better about being associated with that brand also. So, which is a shame, but I think that we as a society overall have kind of accepted that as a norm in our behaviors, because does much ever change? I don't know.
No, you're right. Brands have constantly pushed this idea of by the use of Twitter.
We lost you a bit there, John.
You lost me. Shit. All right, I'm back. So, when it comes to brands, they're either trying to pretend to be our savior or our friend or our confidant in some way, and through social media again, have various different ways of personifying what they do. And that in itself is quite scary. If you believe that Pizza Hut is talking to you when you're looking at a tweet, then you've got a serious problem. But yet we will respond in kind. We'll share it. I mean, I won't. I don't buy Pizza Hut, but I've seen fuckers that do. So what I'm really saying is, you've essentially got a world where we've actually lost the idea of corporate entities being anything other than the money, even though we know that's the actual fact. I mean, how many times do you see people getting really angry about a film not making enough money? You know, they're angry that these big corporate giants haven't made $2 billion out of that new superhero movie. Get over it. It's not really like, it doesn't matter. Stories matter, fair enough, yeah. But what they've created is something to make money out of your nostalgia value. So, sorry.
The argument at the moment. The argument between Endgame and Avatar being #1 at the box office is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, one's 12 years old and the other one's just playing and everything that I love. So get out of my face. And the other thing I saw
we have to be people who haven't seen it. So don't worry, if you don't know what Avatar is, don't worry. We're not going to go into it. Move on, please.
Don't worry. One thing I was going to say, there was a tweet last week, I believe, from Burger King that said women should be in the kitchen. Wow. That was quite a large tweet with an advert. And if you haven't seen it, it is one of the biggest missteps I've ever seen since Pepsi and Kendall Jenner 3 years ago. Everyone should have a Pepsi and feel happy. Wow. But the body of the tweet was talking about the statistics of male to female chefs in the general space, and that women should be going into that space. But going back to what we said last week, we want a lot of brands and a lot of companies want to offer that catchy title or tweet or image that is going to get people talking. And what's the old adage, bad publicity is still publicity, or something of that nature. And it got a lot of retweets, and all the other, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, they all had that piled on, and they had these little discussions between them. But yeah, I just thought that one was interesting.
So just to clarify, they were essentially trying to get women into management, and that was they were using the old kind of sexist trope of them being in the kitchen.
Yeah,
so it's actually positive, but trolling the audience.
Yeah,
times, fucking hell.
But most people do not read the body of the tweet or the replies. They just see that, get angry, and then start going, ah. I did.
The dialogue. I think that's very clever. I didn't see it, but I think it's funny and clever.
So, anyone else on that, or can I move on?
I think there's a quick moment where I think maybe it's worth a little shout out. Is that I think we were talking about Bob Chipman, Movie Bob, during the week, Simon. Great YouTuber, does brilliant social commentary and media commentary. Somehow he manages to throw in effortless stuff in there. I don't know how, but quite recently he re-upped a piece called "Pop Goes the Gander" parts 1 and 2, which is very, very cool. It's sort of a revisit of how propaganda ceased to be in your face in the 50s and then became something else in the 60s during the Cold War. And I think it dovetails nicely into this, because there's an element there where I think at one point he says it stops being like support your country because it's the right thing to do, and it starts being like, well, you're a gentleman of discernment. You know I'm going to try and sell you something, but let's do it anyway. We both know this is a joke. I feel like this is the next step of that, where it's like, you're a person of discernment. You know I'm a corporate entity and capitalism is the end of everything. But like, here's a funny joke. Like, and people will just go with it because they're like, yeah, I know you know that I know. We're cool. We're fine. Just throw it at me. And then it still goes in. It still sticks there. You're still talking about this advert. You know what I mean?
Can't get it out. Can't get the image out.
I know.
I want a Whopper. So it might happen. Yeah.
Dusty, it still works. So I'm sure we can link said thing. But yeah, I think it's an interesting point. And yeah, that perhaps the irony is more of an advert than the advert itself sometimes.
Yeah, advertisers, marketing teams have really focused on bringing psychology, back, in, as you were saying, into their messaging, because they know that certain phrases, certain words, certain imagery flicks that response in our brains to either get angry, happy, sad, whatever. Same way we get about music as well, and some of the job listings you will see will be specifically for a particular marketing agency that for one advert that really wants to emote a particular feeling in a particular group. And I don't see anything wrong with that. If you understand how people will react to certain things and you're going to make money off it, so be it. In some respects, like sales funneling on YouTube, where you'll listen to someone speak for 15 minutes on an advert and ask you, oh, I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet. I'm not going to tell you. We'll get to the end of the video. And then they've sold you everything and the idea. And you think by the end of the 15 minutes, okay, look, whatever, I'll pay you the £997. Just shut up and let me have the free course, or let me have the course. And that has been developed from, the tactics that the more traditional advertisers have used as well. So that's just my shillings. So my final question is, in a society that is aiming to be more progressive and inclusive, will cancel culture continue, or will it transform into something more positive? Reshma.
That's a great question. I can't tell the future, so I can't answer it.
Please try.
I would like very much for it to transform into something amazing. This society, this world that we share, I would love for it to be beautiful and inclusive and a massive, massive safe space for everybody. Do I think that will happen? No. It won't happen. I think that the first issue is, I will come back to that idea of the objective. We don't seem to have an objective at any juncture of any transformation. It's like we transform for the sake of transforming, or accidentally. I just think we literally transform accidentally. I'll go with that. And that's a worry for me. That's a very big worry for the species. And the little pockets, each pockets of communities that we engage in and with, as Oliver was saying earlier, unless there's a set creed, an actual real idea of who we are and what our where our lines are drawn and what we accept and what we're about, unless that's very clear at some point in any group, I don't know how we can have an objective in the first place. And so secondly, how does this apply to cancel culture? All we're saying is no, just no, no, no. But we're not finding the solutions. We're just saying no to people, no to ideas. No, you can't say this. No, you can't say that. But what's the solution? Where are we actually trying to get this place to? Where are we trying to get to with this? That's the part that worries me. And I think that's just leading to more disillusionment, definitely for me. So I don't know if anybody else feels that it's a safe space out there on the internet, in the world, on the high street. I don't feel safe. And that's sort of very in line with what's going on right now in the streets. What do you think?
Great point. Great point. Has anyone else got to add to that?
Yeah, I agree, Reshma. Like, with what you're saying about, there should be a safe space. There's not. There definitely should be. But like moving forward, maybe, like I was saying earlier, like by just dismissing people and dismissing not cancel culture, by just saying, like Reshma was saying then, like, no, you're wrong, and not allowing people to admit their mistakes and elaborate and ask the questions about stuff they don't understand. If we just keep saying we can't just cancel these people, then maybe we will get slightly more towards that nice and safe environment. Maybe I'm an idealist, but
I think idealism's beautiful. I think we're all idealists in this room. The thing is, we all have different ways of getting to that ideal place. That is, if we have a vision of it. And I don't think it's particularly fair to ask the world to have that shared vision, because different cultures, different sensibilities, how many capitalistic structures have warped countries beyond their actual national ideas of self. If someone tells me, I'm an English citizen, they'll have a different idea of it than someone else down the road, let alone what it means to be British. So yeah, there are many reasons to feel disillusioned, Reshma, and I've already pointed out many other ways to be disillusioned.
I think seeing as we're talking about the future, I might finally go on a rant on Rantbox. Yeah. No, in all seriousness, I think, again, this is pure speculation. As Reshma says, this is the future and no one can really say for sure. And obviously, I'd like to put out an idea, but I think that with all ideas and with all concepts and things like that, well, half the world can embrace it, the other half can simultaneously be falling apart. So take it with a grain of salt. But one thing I think I see with those poor abused Daily Mail and Middle Englishes that I horribly spat on earlier, and all people who suffer for this problem of not knowing where to go, not knowing how to arrive at a solution. The one thing that I keep coming back to is the fact that, how best to put this, the root of, to understand a flower, you have to understand the root and stem of a plant. You see what I mean? To understand how the top works, you must understand the bottom. And I think not enough people understand the bottom of a problem to really see the top. Like, they understand the reaction, but they don't understand the why. For instance, why is being sexist bad? Or why is, stealing bad? Or why is murder bad? Essentially, why are they bad? Like, yes, they are bad. I mean, even I agree with all those things being bad, but why? And then often it comes down to very basic concepts, very simple things. I think Terry Pratchett said it best when, the root of all evil is treating people like things. If you can look at a situation with that sort of casuistry attitude and say, okay, I'm in a problem, I've got this moral context. What is, how am I going to, in this context, not treat people like things? How am I going to take the lessons that I've learned elsewhere and apply them to this situation? And I think maybe that's the problem with cancel culture, with Twitter as a whole, is the fact that people see a thing out of context, they get angry about it, but then they never say why. They never look at the context. They never look at the morality of the situation. There's an excellent one, which I'm not sure if we're going to get around to story time with John, but Navratilova is an excellent example of that, is that you have to understand the whole branching problem before you can make any kind of decision, because make a decision halfway along the path is just going to lead to disaster.
Do we have time for that?
I'm keen to do some of it and then we'll finish it in the next.
Sorry, no, I was just responding to Ollie in the fast-paced nature of 360 media, 24-hour media as well, instant gratification as well from the likes of Instagram likes, validation, Facebook, and comments coming back and forth. Do people have the time to do the necessary research to get to the root cause of some of these issues or statements?
They do. They actually fucking do. Like, they just don't necessarily benefit from the 24-hour clock of all these different distractions that are going on. Sorry, Ollie, that was your question, but I was needed
No.
to say that.
I think I think it's good that you jumped in. I think there's an element there where, sorry, again, there's a thing that was often said about music is that music's development has ceased because there are no pockets of development. There are no isolated places for which new things can take root. I disagree with that, actually. I think that's not really true. But you could say the same thing of morality and of, social problems, is that the internet has forced us all into a place where what would normally take hundreds of years to occur and now happens in a space of months. That's part of the reason why we have so much unrest, why there are Christian fundamentalists who would happily set fire to any number of minorities on a burning cross, because they've been forced into the 21st century when they should have 2 more centuries to get behind it. So yeah, this is what the point at which maybe the make or break of that situation is down to people, individuals, I think. Whether you're going to go against your nature and make a sensible human decision or act like an animal at that point. And I don't mean that in the derogatory sense. I mean that in the sort of Frank Herbert sense of, will you gnaw off your own leg to get out of a trap, or will you wait for someone to come rescue you?
Sure.
Will you implode under the weight of moral choices all day long, or will you, stop, grasp hold of the thing and, pull it apart?
What you were saying about why is quite prevalent. I mean, people obviously will not commit the 3 examples that you gave because they know they will get in trouble, but they may not necessarily ask themselves the philosophical question as to why this is a knock-on effect for other people, unless you're a psychopath and killing is your thing. But yeah, sexism, racism, people think that I'm generalizing, but there's a significant amount of people that are, let's say people like Rowan Atkinson, feel that they're handcuffed in that they cannot say and do what they used to do because they will get in trouble. They're not knowing why what they were doing is in some way problematic. Maybe he's not the best example because he's actually talking about the freedom to do satirical comedy, but his statements about it seem to wash over into other more nuanced territory that I don't think he truly understands. But yeah,
I think there's an interesting, sorry guys to keep buying it. There's an interesting point there raised with comedy, which I think you can have 2 people do the very same school of comedy and come out with 2 very different things. For instance, 2 people I admire very much, Rowan Atkinson, who feels chafed by the bonds of not being able to do what he wants to do, but also someone like Daniel Sloss, who is far worse, but has the sort of moral and logical backup to everything he says. You can't fault him, he's bulletproof. And he talks about things. I mean, I saw him live and I came out of the theater with my hands on my head, like, oh my God, like the 3rd act of that show was too much, but I couldn't fault him for it. I could never, I couldn't raise a hand to it. I was just like, yeah, fair enough. You know exactly what you're saying. You know why you're saying it. If that's what you want to say, go right ahead. I think to be offended by someone like that just shows not how bad he is, but how bad you are to some extent. And that's maybe what we all require, is that extra effort, that, maybe it's a meritocracy of values, perhaps.
With that, I'm going to bring this episode of Rantbox to a close. I want to thank you guys for joining me today, and give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves once again to anyone who doesn't know you. So this week, I would like Alice. Please start.
So hi, I'm Alice. I'm a further education lecturer in the Northwest.
Fantastic. Anyone else? Who's next? Oh, you're so nice. Come on. Ollie, can you go ahead, please?
Sure. My name's Ollie. I'm a musician and a music producer in London. And according to Simon, I'm also a philosopher, so that's fun.
it was actually me who wrote on the description that you're a philosopher.
Oh, was it? Oh, well, in that case, John's to blame for when I...
It's very true, though. Nice to meet you, Ollie. I'm John Gray. Began Rantbox TV last year due to wanting to have nuanced conversation that didn't end up with angry messages and people getting irate in threads. So here we are talking about these things without throwing our the baby out of the dishwater, whatever that statement is. If you want to know more about me, there's a description box. You can go there and see more. We will talk about Martina Navratilova at some point. I'm hoping next video. Simon did the right thing by ending this one because we've gone over time. And this
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's fair enough. It's a very nuanced conversation. So just to stick it in at the end would have been wrong. So good call by you.
Okay. Sorry, and Reshma, please.
I'm Reshma. I'm an artist, art therapist, and mentor, mostly working in sort of gang mediation and anti-radicalization.
And I'm Simon Mitchell. I'm an events producer and business development manager based in Sussex at the moment. And that's me. So you guys will be able to find our next episode next Friday. And we have a Rantbox TV episode every Friday. So I hope you will continue to join us. And from me and for everyone else, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.